Hey there, it's Sam. I'm doing this quick video about the chart of Lance Armstrong. Now, the reason I'm doing it isn't because I really care that much about him, this story, or whatever, but it was actually a very good example. I wanted to see what was happening with him, and it was a good opportunity to do a quick rectification, mainly because when I looked online, we have his birth date, and there was no time listed at all. It basically says no time. But there's a lot of events from this person's life that we can look at and see how a rectification would fall into place. Sometimes it falls into place pretty quickly. Now again, I'm not going to swear by this because I haven't had this literally is a result of about 15 or 20 minutes. But I think you'll find very powerful evidence that he probably has a Taurus rising, sidereal Taurus Ascendant. First of all, anyone with this much power, you will absolutely need to see Raja Yogas active, probably in angles, if not the first house, in the harmonic charts, and all of this. Raja Yogas are the foundation of what makes things happen in Vedic astrology, especially powerful things like people becoming a king, like he was, of his industry, world famous. You just don't see this with these charts that sort of hang out in some kind of weird space. There has to be powerful yogas set up to deliver, and then the dashas have to run also. So all that has to work out. Now, again, there was no birth time here. It's September 18th, 1971. They always listed about noon when on the websites when they don't have a birth time. But Vedic astrology works on birth time, so I just looked very quickly, and noon puts the ascendant somewhere here around Libra. And I didn't see that. I also, Scorpio didn't seem right. He's got this exalted Rahu and Mars here, or he's got the exalted Mars. The most powerful placement, the most powerful chart, really, of this configuration of planets would be Taurus Ascendant. The reason is because with the Taurus Ascendant, you would have Saturn in the first house, which is a Raja Yoga in and of itself, because it's an angle and a trine lord in an angle and a trine. And you'd also have this exalted Mars in the 9th house, which is very powerful, the 7th Lord exalted in the 9th. You would also have the ruling planet Venus forming a Raja Yoga with the Sun. First of all, Venus forms a Raja Yoga just by itself because it's the 1st Lord and the 5th. But then it's also the 5th Lord and the 5th Lord, the 1st Lord and the 4th Lord in the 5th, also a Raja Yoga. Also, Mercury forms a Raja Yoga as the 5th Lord in the 4th. Mercury and the Sun exchange. There's all kinds of Raja Yogas when you get this Taurus Ascendant that you just don't get anywhere else, because then the planets wind up in the 3rd house and the 6th house, and it gets all kind of mucked up. But this definitely instinctively looked pretty close. Then I just kind of put it there, or actually I fooled around with it a little bit here first, but then I just put it where it looked to be the strongest, and then started looking. First, also, he looks like a Taurus. Now, this is just something that you get over time when you start to notice, and he also acts like Taurus. His demeanor is quite slow. Even though he's skinny, you can't really base that, but actually, skinny is Saturn. So, plus his nature, Saturn, determined to, bike racing, endurance, he's a triathlete. I mean, he's not just running a sprint, it's triathlon, which has to do with, he's triathlete and the Tour de France, which is an endurance bicycle race, which takes strength and endurance, totally Saturn stuff. Of course, Jupiter aspects the ascendant, there's exalted Mars, Saturn rules the exalted Mars, all kinds of stuff. So let's take, and also the Rahu. So let's look at some of the events, and you'll see it line up with the dashas. Things have to line up with the dashas and the harmonic charts. And this is how you see it work. So first of all, he became the second American ever to win the Tour de France on July 25th, 1999. So July 25th, 1999 was just about less than a month short of his Rahu Saturn cycle. And Rahu Saturn would be when he would have been launched into enormous fame, which was right after that. Because you see, for instance, down here, in fall of 1999, Armstrong was contracted to endorse Wheaties cereal. So that was when Rahu Saturn started. So Rahu Saturn was a huge time. That's when he became world famous, right after he won the Tour de France. one of the most important things about him, though, is this whole transformation from defeating Cancer and how this changed. So this is what's very compelling as well about this particular time. He was diagnosed with testicular cancer in the testicles, abdomen, lungs, brain on October 2nd, 1996, started chemo, and then by early 1997, the cancer was gone. A victory for modern medicine and a triumph of Texas will. So, literally, October 2nd, 1996, by early 97, it was gone. So, early 97, it was gone would be Rahu Jupiter. Early 97, Rahu. So, the start of the Rahu Dasa is what brought on the testicular cancer, but by Rahu Jupiter, it had stopped. And then by the very beginning of Rahu Saturn, he had won the Tour de France. Now, again, why is Saturn so powerful? And of course, Jupiter is a benefic, and it shows healing when it's powerful. Jupiter is aspecting the ascendant, it's aspecting Saturn, of course, and Jupiter is just a benefic. So the Rahu Dasha, Rahu tends to cause. Rahu is obviously it's a malefic that can cause health problems. It's joined an exalted Mars, and it's in a Saturn-ruled sign. So Saturn is the planet of Cancer, actually, and it's in a Saturn-ruled sign. So you can see why Rahu would have been likely to, very likely candidate to start Cancer, and Rahu Jupiter for it to get better very quickly, like a sort of miraculous recovery by early 97, and then within a month, less than a month of Rahu Saturn Dasha, which is the Raja Yoga planet in the first, which also rules his exalted Mars and Rahu in the ninth. He becomes world famous and is wins the Tour de France. Now he wins it several more times, and then by this time around Rahu Ketu, this is when he retires the first time. So we're going to look at other things, not just his sporting life. This is what I also looked at here. With his relationships, you also see this timing very clearly. His wife, Chris, where is it? When we look at his divorces. Okay, September 4th, 2003, the supercyclist and his wife of 5 years announced they will be filing for divorce. So 1998, he would have been married sometime in there. That would have been Rahu Jupiter, because his wife of 5 years filing for divorce in 2003. So that would also encompass this Rahu Jupiter. He was married in Rahu Jupiter. Now we look in the Navamsha chart for marriage, and look at the Navamsha chart. We have a Pisces Ascendant. Now I've rectified this down to like a few minutes. It's 22:42, which is 8:42 p.m. This is what I have. 10:42 p.m. Because that makes these ascendants in the harmonic charts. So this D9, it's Rahu Jupiter. He was married. Jupiter rules the D9 because this is Pisces, and Jupiter goes to the 7th house. Clearly a marriage cycle. And clearly this is very strong for him getting married in Rahu Jupiter Dasha. Jupiter rules the chart, and Jupiter also rules exalted Venus, and Jupiter is in the 7th house primarily. They're filing for a divorce, though, September 4th, 2003. That would have been Rahu Mercury Dasha. Mercury, why does Mercury have to do with changing his relationship status? Okay, Mercury rules the 7th house in the chart. Mercury rules this Jupiter. But see, again, it's not Jupiter now that's ruling, it's Mercury that's ruling. Mercury rules Jupiter, which is the 1st and 10th house lord. Mercury also rules Mars, which is the indicator of arguing. And Mercury goes into the 6th house, which is breaking up and divorcing and arguing and fighting. Divorces have to do with the 6th house as much as anything. 8th and 6th houses. Now, again, you can see he got married when he ran the dasha of the planet that rules the D9, and then he got a divorce with the planet that rules the 7th house in the D9, because the 7th house ruler goes into the 6th. So you just want to see if these things are going to produce a result in the harmonic chart, and then if it produces the result that it shows, it clearly does. The 7th house is a giver. The 6th house is a taker. So when he ran the dasha, or the sub-dasha of the planet that rules it, that goes to the angle, it gives the relationship. When he runs the sub-dasha of the planet that rules the angle, but it goes into a dushtana in the 6th, and also rules the karaka of fighting, it broke the relationship. So Rahu Mercury, the relationship broke, 2003. So he got the divorce in 2003 in Rahu Mercury after being married in 1998 in Rahu Jupiter. You see? Now we also come down and look at, Sheryl Crow. Now this is a very interesting thing here. August 31st, 2005, he proposed marriage to his girlfriend of 2 years, musician Sheryl Crow. She accepted. The engagement was short-lived. On February 2006, the couple announced they were splitting up. So, again, this is interesting. Look in the Navamsha chart here for this. Ketu, this happened in Ketu, Rahu Ketu. It was August 2005, and then by February 2006, the couple announced they were splitting up. February 2006 was Rahu Venus. Okay, so Rahu Ketu is when they announced is when he proposed. So it had been his girlfriend of 2 years, so that also happened in the Rahu Mercury dasha when they started going out. And again, so you can see Mercury gives because it produces the 7th lord, but first it took away, and then it gave another girlfriend, and he proposed in Rahu Ketu. So Ketu's in the 11th house, which gives ambition, and it's joined the sun, which is a very prominent, it's the karaka of prominence. That's what the sun is, and it's literally a star. And not to be too glib, but he literally proposed to a star, Sheryl Crow. And it was, this was a stellar partnership. Lance Armstrong and Sheryl Crow, they were seen at the Grammys, and he was really in some ways at the height of his celebrity, so he had a relationship that reflected that after divorcing his wife, where he had kids, where he married her before he was anybody. He continued that cycle in Rahu Mercury, because Mercury does rule Mars and Jupiter, which gives relationships. It continues in Ketu, but the relationship didn't last. He proposed marriage, thinking it would be this great, powerful, thing. But then in Rahu Venus, it broke up. Well, you're saying, well, why would it break up? Venus is exalted in the 1st house. Yes, it's exalted in the 1st house, and Venus is also the 8th lord. And this is why I always tell people, students, do not get so enamored with exalted planets. You must absolutely, constantly, always look at the houses the planet rules. Venus exalted is a very difficult planet, generally. It's good for instance, Geminis, because it's exalted in the 10th, and it's the 5th lord exalted in the 10th. Often, though, it's very tricky. For Pisces, it's the 3rd and the 8th house ruler exalted in the 1st. So it's very powerful, and it's very powerful to break things and transform them and change them, because that's what the 8th house is about. So Rahu Venus, his engagement to Sheryl Crow broke. And then June 4th, 2009, he and his girlfriend, Anna Hansen, welcomed a son named Maxwell. So June 4th, 2009. So June 2009, he was in Rahu's sun. So Rahu's sun dasha gave him a child. Well, look at this. The sun is in the 5th house, so he got another child. We don't know when his other children were born. They were probably born in Rahu Saturn because, well, he married in Rahu Jupiter. So either in Rahu Jupiter or Rahu Saturn, of course, either one can give children because Jupiter is the karaka of children, and Saturn is, Saturn rules, or, Saturn is in the 1st house and it aspects Jupiter, and it's just a very big giver anyway for Taurus. It's the Raja Yoga karaka planet. So he probably had his children in Rahu Jupiter and Rahu Saturn, because then Rahu Mercury is when he divorced his wife. Even Rahu Mercury, he might have had children. I don't really know though, because Mercury is the 5th house ruler. But the sun is literally the 4th house ruler, and it goes to the 5th. So this is why the sun gives him a child. And it's joined Venus, the 1st house ruler. So that, like I said before, this is a very powerful Raja Yoga. It's the 1st and the 4th lord in the 5th. So it's 2 angle lords in the 5th, but the 1st house ruler is also a trine lord. So so the sun becomes very powerful as a giver because it rules the first house, which is a trine lord, and it rules an angle. So it's again, it's not just, basic rules. The fourth lord gives a stable home. So June 4th, 2009, it's, the sun the sun is in the fifth house. It rules the fourth. The other thing that's even more important is the sun rules Mercury, the fifth lord. Again, this is an exchange between Mercury and the sun. So the sun dasha is going to give the results of Mercury because the sun is in Mercury's sign. So the sun actually rules the fifth lord, and it rules the moon. So again, there's a thousand ways that this can give children, the sun. So he has a child in Rahu's sun because the sun, obviously, like I say, it rules the fifth lord, it rules the moon, and it goes to the fifth house, and it's exchanging with the fifth lord. So you see this. So now we have this, this recent stuff that's going on with him. It was October 22nd. So now Lance Armstrong, stripped of his titles now, Lance Armstrong is confessing to Oprah and all this stuff now that the nodes have just moved into, Saturn and Rahu are both in his sixth house now by transit. He just entered Jupiter Dasha the middle of 2012. This is also why it's very compelling at this time, because he just entered Jupiter Dasha. Now remember, Rahu Jupiter is what cured him of testicular cancer, but Rahu is joined in exalted Mars. And Rahu is ruled by Saturn, forming a Raja Yoga Karaka. Jupiter has no such grace on his own. This is what you need to understand. This is what's very tricky about Vedic astrology. You're like, well, but Jupiter should be so much better, right? Rahu is a malefic. It's malefic, but the nodes take their sanction by the planets they join as a house ruler first, and then by the planet that rules them. So Rahu is joined exalted Mars, so yes, it created problem, and then it created problem that he defeated very quickly, because it's joined exalted Mars, and its ruler, Saturn, is exalted it's not exalted, but it forms a Raja Yoga in the first house. So when Jupiter came, Rahu is actually a very benefic planet for him, because it's joined an exalted planet in the ninth, if this rectification is correct, and I'm pretty confident in it. I think this is his ascendant. He looks like Taurus. He looks like a bull. He acts like it too. But anyway, so Jupiter Dasha is where he really falls from grace, because Jupiter is the 8th and the 11th house ruler. This is a clear rule in Brihad Parashara Horasastra. Anytime the 8th house ruler also rules a Kama house, which is houses 3, 7, or 11, it becomes an exceedingly cruel planet for that person. And Jupiter is definitely a cruel planet for Taurus. You only need to look at a few charts to see that. The most recent presidential nomination, nominee who lost, Mitt Romney, had this. Everybody was like, oh, he's got Jupiter, Moon in the 7th. Yeah, Jupiter's the 8th lord also. And that the 8th lord is a cruel planet. So he started the dasha of the 8th lord this summer, July 2012. He starts the dasha of the 8th lord. And what's going on? Rahu is going through that. He just had Ketu going through his first house. So Rahu is going through the 7th house, going over the 8th lord, and he gets stripped of his titles. October 22nd, cycling legend Lance Armstrong's fall from grace was completed Monday when the sport's governing body stripped him of all of his 7 Tour de France titles. That happened in October 2012 when Rahu was in his 7th house and Ketu was in his first house, very close to what would be this ascendant, and if this time is right, and it could be wrong, there's no question, but this timing adds up really well, and I would feel confident doing a reading. Of course, there's more to rectification. If you have this many indicators, I would do this, and then I would start asking this person questions. I would start looking very deeply into things, and then start doing a reading and see how it played out, and I would be pretty confident that this is correct. But anyway, so you had Rahu Ketu go through his 1st and 7th house axis. The 7th house is also a Marika house, which is a killer house, which means it's because it's where we have a lot of high desires. And he has a lot of high desires to dominate people, to win, and he's been a very ruthless individual. If you read any of the reports of the people that who had tried to oppose him during the time he was lying about this doping, which again, 8th house lord is about lying. And he's also, so he's got the 8th house lord in the 7th where he lies to people. 7th house is other people. He probably cheated on his wife, all that other stuff too. Because the 7th lord, because Jupiter, it's Jupiter, but it's also the 8th lord. And you must look at Jupiter as the 8th lord for a Taurus person. That's the nature of that planet for this individual. It's aspected by Saturn as well. But Rahu goes over Jupiter this summer. He gets stripped of his titles. And now it changes and goes into his 6th house. Rahu is in the 6th, Ketu is in the 12th. It's taking all kinds of stuff away from him now. And it's the 6th house where he's now having to suffer the penalty. 6th house is, suffering the penalty for your actions. It's being punished. It has to do with punishment and consequences. So this is why now we see that. Now, if we look in the chart, though, even as it relates to his career, remember Rahu Jupiter is where he wound up beating the Cancer. And look in that when you rectify the chart and you put the D10, you got Mars Rahu in the 1st. His Rahu Dasha was when all that happened. We found out about Lance Armstrong and his Rahu Dasha. All this happened when he was in Rahu. He's got Mars Rahu in the D10. Powerful Raja Yoga here. You got the 9th Lord in the 1st with Rahu. Just a sick Raja Yoga. Incredibly powerful, right? And then so Rahu Jupiter is when he beat the Cancer. And Rahu Saturn. Saturn has joined exalted moon, and it also rules Mercury, the 7th, the 4th and 7th house ruler. But now he's in Jupiter Dasha, and again, look at Jupiter in the D10. Not Rahu Jupiter. Rahu again, when in the D10, when it comes to his career, Rahu perseveres, and Rahu Jupiter is when he beat Cancer. But just Jupiter Dasha. Jupiter rules the D10, and you're seeing his fall from grace. Jupiter rules the D10, it rules Mars, and it rules Rahu. Again, rulerships, and it's joined Ketu in the 7th, which is the Marika house again. So you see this, the difference between Rahu and Jupiter Dasha for him is really quite big. Rahu Dasha is much more auspicious, also based on planetary dignity. This is in a great enemy dignity in the D10, so you're seeing his fall from grace, his fall from public, because Jupiter also rules the 10th house in the D10. This is why his career has been very public about him personally, because his career in general is Pisces with Mars Rahu in the 1st, and now Jupiter Dasha, he's getting the karmas of what that career was really based on. So you see this fall from grace, and also in the D9, because the D9 is also the chart of our punya, or our merit. It's also the chart of that. So in Jupiter Dasha, Jupiter's in a little bit better dignity. It's actually in a neutral dignity here, not great enemy. So you might find that there is some goodwill and grace awaiting for him, maybe more than it might seem right now, because of his Cancer foundation and stuff. But it's going to be it's a heavy blow. There's no question about it. So this is basically this time I rectified this. I think the time, using the Vedic techniques, I have it at 10:42 p.m. This is using Lahiri Ayanamsha. It's actually September 18th, 1971, 10:42 p.m. in Plano, Texas. And that's using Lahiri Ayanamsha. That gives you the Dasha sequence that unfolds this way. And again, you can't ever be 100% sure. I thought I would look at it really quick and just instinctively try to see what made sense. Usually when something like this, you can rectify pretty quickly if you find a lot of details about the person's life. So this added up pretty quickly, and I'm pretty confident in this. I would do a reading. I would start a reading this way and say, so did this happen? From here you would, you would ask more questions, of course, to make sure that you're right, but this looks pretty tight. So I hope this was helpful for you. I'm glad to share this with you.